The NFL tagline deadline literally just passed. It was 4 p.m. Eastern, and the people, the three players really who were at the forefront of the headlines are Tony Pollard, Saquon Barkley, and Josh Jacobs, because these were the three running backs that were tagged in a running back market that has been very much fairly maligned for being basically exploitative. The franchise tag is $10.1 million fully guaranteed. And that is much lower than other positions because essentially there's like a calculation where you take some sort of percentage of the you come up with the mathematical formula, so where it's a yearly value that's, I think, towards the top of the market but not at the top of the market, and the market is known to be obviously very, very depressed right now because teams are preferring not to have workhorse running backs. They're preferring not to pay these guys. They just want to draft them, run them into the ground, and cast them aside. And Tony Pollard has signed the franchise tag. Josh Jacobs and Saquon Barkley did not. It was slightly surprising that Saquon didn't sign his extension before 4 p.m., but I'm not going to blame him. Saquon has been known to be team friendly, the kind of guy that wants to play, wants to be in the building. He's a team captain, although I think Josh Jacobs is too. But the point is that you shouldn't conflate those two because those guys deserve to be paid. Particularly, I would say Saquon, who, man, has he been through some tough years in New York and has been, I think, the face of the franchise. However, as a Giants fan, I would never have drafted a running back second overall to make them the face of the franchise because I think that that is outdated football roster construction. The game has evolved in the same way that you need all guys on the court in basketball to be able to shoot from three for the most part to be competitive, to be able to score at multiple levels on the floor. The same thing is to be said for not constructing your roster around one guy who is the most likely player on your team to get injured. The problem, though, is that because the positional differences in football are so acute, this formula for paying these guys is exploitative, just 100%. With Saquon and Josh Jacobs being these fantasy stars, Tony Pollard too, whatever, running backs in general, the fact that they're paid less than Hunter Renfrow, for example, or wide receiver threes on some teams, twos minimum, as they take beatings, it's wrong. Like the tight end market is actually still, it's an underrated, I think, storyline that the tight end market is a little bit depressed right now. But Evan Engram was able to reach an extension with the Jaguars, and he didn't have to play on the franchise tag. Former Giant Evan Engram. And at the very least, that market is sort of adjusting and moving in a certain direction. I mean, part of it is the fact that Kelsey needs to get paid. He's still the top tight end in the league, and he needs more money.
Yeah, he
and
famously has like one of the more like for his stature of player, one of the more like team friendly deals in the league.
So does Patrick Mahomes.
And Mahomes himself, of course.
And in the midst of this, Chris Jones is looking for an extension.
Right,
so it
right.
complicates some
things. It's going to be a lot of money for
the
Chiefs to pony up at some point.
But the cap is exploding. Like,
right,
as a
totally.
Giants fan, you have this is a players' rights situation, and the entire structure of the league should be different so that running backs should either not be subject to the standard rookie contract structure. They should be able to get out of their contracts after like year 3, for example, as something I heard on, I think, the Dan Patrick show, as a alternative where they can get out after year 3, no franchise tag, and the teams have to extend them while they're at the prime of their career. That's one way to adjust to it. The other way is for the league to have a more non-traditional model where players that are bringing in eyeballs on the fantasy side of things, fantasy football, which is a huge market, including daily fantasy with these sports books that the league is involved with, that they have a fund where they pay these guys for the eyeballs that they bring to their product, as opposed to them getting punished financially for doing the most that they can for their team. It is wrong. The free market doesn't solve all because it's all artificially constructed, particularly when it comes to this tag situation. Running backs should be treated better. Obviously, Tony Pollard, he felt probably more pressure to sign the tag because Ezekiel Elliott is still a free agent. I think they're going to bring him back maybe on a much cheaper deal. It doesn't seem like he wants to go elsewhere other than the Cowboys. That would be my guess. But that threat is still looming, or at the very least, the Cowboys front office was holding that over Tony Pollard's head. For Saquon and Josh Jacobs, and Jacobs has been open and said, I want to carry the torch, essentially. I want to take a stand for the rest of my position. And Saquon Barkley, it seems like he's kind of drawn a line in the sand, which I totally understand. The problem, though, is that those two guys aren't going to be able to do it alone. There needs to be systemic change from the union and the league. This is an emergency on behalf of the position. These guys shouldn't be putting their bodies through the ringer for very little money compared to the rest of their peers. And I'll also say this. What Saquon and Josh Jacobs are trying to do is not for them in the same way. Like Saquon Barkley, look, he's done Campbell's Soup and he's in New York. He's got some endorsement deals. He'll be okay. But the median NFL salary is like $800,000, maybe a little bit above that. The average career length for an NFL player is 3 to 4 years. For running backs, man, you could blow your knee out and you could be gone. And what they're trying to do is, as the stars, push the conversation about the position and the labor politics behind it to the forefront of people's minds. And yeah, they're trying to get theirs. But I also think Josh Jacobs has been clear that this is not just about him. And so, I mean, I just feel for the running backs because they're being cast aside and thrown aside by a league that benefits immensely from their production. I say this every time this topic comes up. Fantasy football brings in people who would not normally watch football. Like, I have friends who are not football fans, but they're in an office league, they're in a college league, and they'll tune in because they want to see the name of their guy, even if they don't know any other player's name on the team. The name of their guy go into the end zone for a touchdown. And those are running backs. Protect the game and protect the running backs. That's the bottom line here. So again, from a fan perspective, I did not want the Giants to take Saquon Barkley second overall. I wanted them to take Josh Allen. I mean, I was told that I was an idiot for that take. Look, yeah. Look where we're at right now, by the way. We took Daniel Jones the next year. Would I have rather had Josh Allen? Certainly, right? But this isn't just about how I'm right.
You can take that one to the bank forever, I think.
I mean,
That's a blank check.
Oh, totally. But a lot of smart fans didn't want to take a running back second overall because Gettleman's an idiot.
Yeah.
And, that's a horrible use of draft capital, and also because of the politics of the position and the situation. Once you draft a running back to be your workhorse, there is this internal pressure because of the draft status to get the guy the ball, get the guy the ball, get the guy the ball. That hurts his body. It's way too much to put on somebody. And it hurts the team. So I didn't love that, right? Of course, at the time. But does that mean that I think that there isn't a dire situation at the running back position? Yes, because there are not enough incentives put in place by the league for general managers to actually pay these guys in a way that is accurately reflective of their sacrifice for the team. So, these are labor issues. These are labor politics. And again, the running back coming out of college that plays 3 years and makes $800K, that's money that he's trying to invest in for the future, for the rest of his life. Because he's been trained since he was 5 years old that this is your dream. This is your skill set. Well, you'll go to college because you have to, because you can't get paid for your services right out of high school, because we've decided that every player that comes into the NFL has to play 3 years for free for universities that don't pay them, that don't have interest in educating them, that treat them as semi-professionals and exploit the hell out of them as they pay their head coaches $10-12 million a year, whatever the hell it is. That is fundamentally wrong. And so once they get into the NFL, these billionaires have to pony up, because these guys are providing immense value to the franchise and to the sport as a whole.
Yeah, and also, like, to your point on that, it's not at this point anymore. It's not entirely even the standard across sports anymore. I mean, hockey players, baseball players, but even basketball players, especially now with a little bit of the carve out with going to like G League Ignite or going to play overseas, like they don't have to necessarily work completely for free or almost work at a loss by going to college.
Yeah.
They don't have to do that. Like, football players are now almost in a unique circumstance where their labor is sort of taken from them, extracted from them for 3 years before they can make anything off of it, even with name, image.
And can I just say, when your labor is extracted, this is not like somebody whose labor is extracted working with their mind. This is someone whose labor is extracted with their
unpaid
physical
internship on a computer.
And it's diminishing returns as they get hit and hit and hit and age more. So
and
that's why they have to cash in a small window.
Of course, and they have to cash in a small window, especially if you're a running back. As you said, the average career length is like 4 or 5 years. You've retired from the thing, as you've said, that you've trained your whole life or most of your life to do before maybe you're 30.
Yeah.
And then you have the rest of your life. And I think ostensibly these teams and these organizations have a responsibility to these people. And I see I see what you're saying, Emma, about the Saquon situation from you as a football observer but also as obviously a class conscious and labor conscious person, and also as a Giants fan, the tension there that like Saquon is kind of being given a raw deal by virtue of, like, at the time, front office mismanagement, poor draft pick allocation, poor roster schematics.
It was too much for him.
And now, as a result of that, as well as kind of how inequitable the pay structure is for the franchise tag specifically for running backs, he's getting screwed over. He didn't ask to be taken second overall. He of course, I'm sure for his financial security, of course, every player wants to be taken as high as they can for that very reason.
Right.
But that wasn't his choice. And now basically, by virtue of where he was picked, what position he plays, and where the league and the game has gone, him and other people like Tony Pollard, like Josh Jacobs, like Austin Eckler, are getting fucked over because they don't have the same positional value as other players per the way that the game and the league are trending, and there's nothing to adjust for that. It's almost it's slightly analogous to what the actors and writers are facing right now, where it's like the system and the league have changed, but there has been no accommodation for the people actually working to reflect those changes.
Yeah, well said. And I mean, and you can just see how they put dollars and cents on different kinds of players based on how they've structured the rules. Like,
totally.
Daniel Jones is not in a vacuum a 4 times the football player that Saquon Barkley Saquon Barkley is. Like, Daniel Jones is not top 5 at his position. Saquon probably is, right?
And even for example, Josh Jacobs led the league in all-purpose yards, basically.
Totally.
And he's less valuable than like Jimmy Garoppolo,
Dalvin
for
Cook
example.
isn't on the team. He had 1,200 yards last year.
He was like one of the best running backs. And also, as you're saying, when it comes to fantasy value too, and how much money goes into fantasy and goes into sports betting, the NFL generates a significant amount of revenue and amount of attention by having people have a personal investment in specific players via fantasy and via betting, and those players aren't getting anything from it.
No, and so the The point, though, is that the quarterback, though, the rules are structured for the quarterback right now. That is why a team feels comfortable giving Daniel Jones $40 million and Saquon Barkley only 10, and not
Right.
to sign him long term, and to potentially let him walk into free agency next year. That's what happens. They could tag him a second time, and then it's like a much bigger bump, but they probably won't do that just because of that bump. And I do and so the point is, like, the quarterbacks are protected by these rules about hitting the quarterback and all that stuff, and so that's why they're getting all the money. And yeah, I feel conflicted. I wanted Saquon to get the extension. I did. And I think that Joe Shane has now shown a propensity to be pretty a pretty big hardliner, and the negotiations with DJ went up to the 4 p.m. deadline at the time of the free agency window a few months ago, and these negotiations clearly went up to the deadline as well. And reportedly, Saquon wanted 16, Giants were at around 13. I would have felt comfortable with 13. But at the same time, the cap is about to explode. Like, these guys deserve more money. I don't know. I'm getting way too in the weeds of, like, the Giants cap situation, but they deserve more money. It's not right. And it's a really scary thing for a guy to be going into a year where he's expected to run and get hit and play with reckless abandon, to know that he could not have he could lose millions and millions and millions of dollars for his family. Saquon has a daughter, with one hit, just right there. And how can you play? How can you play on a 1-year deal when you have no guarantees next year, that position in particular, without feeling any sense of hesitation? How can you give your full self? That's the human element behind this.
And it's like, there are very few jobs and very few sports where, like, that ultimately is the calculation, right? Where it's like, not only, like, do I want to do this? Do I, like, there are always talks when the draft comes around, or certain players have a situation like, certain players have a situation where it's like, do they love the game enough? Like, are they obsessed with basketball? Is it the only thing, or football? Is it the only thing that they want to do? I mean, what comes with that also, there's never a consideration of, does he want to put himself in a position for potentially maybe not what he's actually worth relative to every other factor in the National Football League, to potentially, like, get serious, lasting physical trauma before the rest of his life plays out?
Yeah.
Like, I understand if people aren't obsessed with football enough to go through that. I understand people like Andrew Luck who wanted to retire because of that, or Chris Borland, a defensive player on the 49ers, who retired prematurely. Those guys would have still had great careers. They were great players in their own right, but they thought their life was more important.
And they made that choice. And so the players that do make that choice to risk their livelihoods, or I should say their health, for this sport that they love and that a lot of people love, they should be paid commensurate to that.